Hello everybody and welcome along to today's webinar all about pensions, re-enrollment and re-declaration. My name's Calvin and I will be one of your hosts and presenters for today. I am joined by Duncan as well, who will be co-hosting with me, who will be appearing a little later in the session. So we'll have a quick look now at what we'll be covering in today's session. So firstly, I'll be taking you through what is re-enrollment. So what it is, when you need to do it, and what steps are involved. We'll also be having a quick look at the manual process. I'll then be handing over to Duncan, who will be taking you through re-enrollment using the pensions module for those pension module users today. So he'll be demoing how to complete that re-enrollment using that pension module itself. Then back to myself, who will look at the re-declaration, so declaring your compliance with the pension regulator, and we'll be having a little bit of a quiz, which has got 3 questions. Now the quiz is optional and all answers are completely anonymous, so feel free to join in if you wish. And all 3 questions are what we'll be covering prior to that as well, so it is a little bit of a recap there. Then we'll finish off things with further support and any remaining questions you have. So with that being said, let's dive into it and we'll have a quick look at what is re-enrollment. So what is re-enrollment? Well, re-enrollment is every 3 years, you must assess if your employees need to go back into a pension scheme. So if you have any employees who've opted out, for example, every 3 years, they will need to be reassessed and then added back onto the pension scheme. If your employees are already enrolled and you then be reassessing them, they will already be in the scheme, so you'll not need to do anything, but you must reassess everybody as it is. So your re-enrollment duties will vary depending on whether you have any employees who fall into a worker category that you must enroll, like I just mentioned there. So if you've got eligible employees who have opted out, they'll need to be re-enrolled. Eligible employees who are already in, they'll need to stay in. And of course, non-eligible and entitled will not have too much to do for those guys. So we've got a bit of a timeline for you here of events. So the first date to point out will be the 3rd anniversary of your staging or duty start date, or your previous re-enrollment date, which will be the more common one now. And you have a 6-month window based on this particular date. All right, so whatever your 3rd anniversary of your staging or duty start date or your previous re-enrollment date was, you've got 6 months, which is 3 months before that date or 3 months after that date. So your earliest possible re-enrollment date is 3 months before it. Your latest is 3 months after. So you do have a 6-month window to complete your re-enrollment. Now there is a deadline as well for your re-declaration of compliance. Now this is solely based on your 3rd anniversary of your staging or duty start date or your previous re-enrollment date, and it is 5 months from that date. So it doesn't matter which date you choose within that 6-month window, it will always be 5 months from that one date. So for example, if you decide to go with the latest possible re-enrollment date, you will have a 2-month window to get your deadline, to get your re-declaration of compliance done before the deadline. If you go with the earliest possible enrollment date, you'll have 8 months because it's 5 months from that one date. So do keep that one in mind. So what are the steps involved when it comes to re-enrollment? There are 3 of them. The first step is to assess and re-enroll any eligible employees. Your second step is to write to your employees who you've re-enrolled. And then finally, you must complete your re-declaration of compliance. So as I mentioned, we are going to have a quick look now at the manual process of re-enrollment. The first step will be manually assessing your employees, which isn't something I can show you in the program because you will be doing that yourself based on what your employees' age and wage is. However, I can show you where the legislation information is because you can find that in Sage 50 Payroll. So I will show you that. So you'll have to assess whether your employees are eligible, non-eligible, or entitled using their wage and their age. Then you'll be assigning a pension scheme to any eligible employees who are not currently in a scheme. And we'll show you how to do that manually as well. Finally, for contacting any employees you have re-enrolled, you can download an email template from the pensions regulator website to send to your employees. So the pensions regulator do have a template that you can then download in order to send to any employees you have re-enrolled. So what we'll do now, let's jump into the program itself and we'll have a look at the manual process, and I'll show you where you can check that legislation information. So here we are in Sage 50 Payroll. So the first thing to point out there is going to be the legislation details. So you'll need to assess your employees manually using their age and the wage. And if I go to company in the bottom left here and then legislation, you'll see we have a tab across the end of the list across here, or the row. Get my words mixed up there. Automatic enrollment tab. So click on this, and here you have all of the automatic enrollment legislation details. So the first thing to look at will be your earnings trigger. So there's your wage element of it. So you've got annual, monthlies, 4 weeklies, fortnightly, and weekly options, all available down here. And then you have your assessment ages down there. So your eligibility age is 22, and your earliest assessment age is 16. So if they're over 22, they're paid monthly, and they earn more than £833 a month, they will be classed as eligible. If they are under 22 but earn more than that, they're non-eligible. If they're over 22 but they earn less than that, they're also non-eligible. And again, if they're under 16, they are classed as entitled. So that is where you can find the legislation details to be able to manually assess your employees. Okay, let's go ahead and assign an employee, assign a pension scheme to an employee who has opted out. Let's open up our employees. I like to right click and select open employee. However you do it, it's completely up to yourself. So let's then go ahead and click on the pensions tab in the employee record. You'll see we have no pension scheme set for employee 1 here. And if I click manage schemes, you'll see that we have a pension scheme that was in this employee. So we know that this employee has actually opted out previously. So they were enrolled on the 1st of October 2020. They were then opted out on the 30th of October 2020 because we've got a to and from date. So we've now manually assessed this employee and realized that this employee is eligible, so must be re-enrolled into a pension scheme. Okay, so this is the legislation, so you must do this, whether you know the employee is going to want to opt out or not. They can still then opt out, but they have to follow this process. Okay, so you still must enroll them. So click add to add a new scheme. Then you'll be selecting your scheme reference from the bottom. We only have one pension scheme, so we've got my pension scheme available here. Click OK. You'll see we have all of our dates entered. The joint scheme date and active membership achieved is based on our process date currently. Now, if these were to change, you would need to contact your pension provider to make sure you've got the right date. You can, of course, come back in here and change those. Make sure your primary scheme tick box is ticked, and you'll see that the contribution amounts are based on what your pension scheme settings are. However, if you do need to, you can adjust these on an individual basis. So for this individual employee in this section as well. So we're just going to leave everything as default for now. We're just going to click OK, and you'll see now we have an additional line with my pension scheme again with a new from date, a blank to date, and a primary scheme. If I hit close, you'll see now primary scheme shows as my pension scheme. We haven't got into enter payments yet, so we're going to have no contributions. Don't worry about that because we haven't actually calculated any pay for this employee just yet. We've simply added in a pension scheme. Once you've done that, you can click save, and that's it. You're all done. So that is adding a pension scheme to an employee manually after you've manually assessed them. So if we pop back to our presentation, because it is now time to bring in Duncan. A quick reminder before I do that though, that once you've manually assessed your employees, assigned the pension scheme that we've done, you'll need to make sure that you downloaded that email template to send to your employees from the pensions regulator website. And with that being said, it is now time to bring in Duncan, who's going to take us through that process, but with using the pensions module. So it is now over to you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Calvin. So you've just seen there how to complete the re-enrolment manually. So it does rely on you checking each employee's age and wage, downloading the templates, etc. But the good news is if you have our pensions module, all of this functionality is built in, and you'll be able to complete many of these re-enrolment tasks by simply running the pension assessment. We're going to show you that a little bit later on in the demo. What I want to touch on first, though, is where to find the re-enrolment settings for any pensions module users out there. So they are found from the main company tasks within the pensions module settings, and you'll see an option to manage cyclical re-enrolment settings. And from here, you'll be able to choose your re-enrolment date. And remember, that can be in the 6-month window based on the 3rd anniversary of the last time you did this. And also, you have the option of choosing whether to re-enroll employees who opted out or left the pension scheme within the prior 12 months to that re-enrolment date. As under the legislation, if they did leave the pension scheme within 12 months of re-enrolment date, you don't have to put them back in. So you can choose to keep them out this time, and then in another 3 years, if they're still with you, still opted out, at that point, they would get re-enrolled. So quick look in the program as to where to find these settings. So you can go into these at any stage, and you'll find them if you go to the company tasks here on the left-hand side, and then you select pensions module settings. So it's going to show you your duty start date or previous re-enrolment date. So in my case, it was the 1st of October 2020. So obviously we're coming up to the 3rd anniversary of that date. And just underneath, if I go into manage my re-enrolment settings, you'll see this is where I can choose a re-enrolment date. So it's defaulted to the 3rd anniversary, but if I wanted to put that back, I can delay it all the way up to December the 31st, which will be 3 months after that re-enrolment date. Or in some cases, you can bring it forward. However, because I've already completed my my August pay run, if I try to set a date within the August tax month, you'll see that we do get a warning that that is historical. So in my case, practically the earliest I can do it would be the 1st of October date. So that's what I'm going to choose as the re-enrolment date. And then just underneath, we've got the option of including or excluding employees who recently opted out or left a pension scheme. By recent, I mean within 12 months of that re-enrolment date. So we've decided that we actually want to exclude them from this assessment. So if someone opted out last month, for example, we don't want to put them back in re-enrolment that early on. So we can choose to exclude them by setting that option. The other thing we have here are individual employee exclusion reasons. So it's quite rare that you would need to use these, but there are circumstances where employees can be excluded from enrolment. So if you've got someone that previously left or opted out of the pension scheme, and there is a valid reason to exclude them from re-enrolment, you can go into this section and you can select that exclusion reason against their name. So probably the most common one is if an employee is working their notice period and they'd previously opted out or left the pension, you could set that as their exclusion reason to avoid having to re-enroll them just before they end up leaving the company. So individual exclusions can be done here if required. And for those who left within the last 12 months, you can choose to exclude them from this section just here. So that's where you would find the settings, and you'll get a reminder to check these settings when you come to do the pension assessment when your re-enrolment date comes up. So just to summarize then, two main areas there in the re-enrolment settings is the re-enrolment date, which you can change as required, and including or excluding those employees who left within the last 12 months. So what we're going to talk about next is when this all happens. So as you approach your re-enrolment date, it is important to assess your employees for re-enrolment at the right time. And this will need to be done in the same tax period as your re-enrolment date. Now, if you run a pension assessment as part of your payroll process, it means you're not going to miss this. It'll just happen at the appropriate time. But just a reminder, if perhaps you don't run the assessment because there's not usually any changes to your staff. You do need to run it in the same tax period as your re-enrolment date. And if that re-enrolment date happens to be after the assessment date, contributions will not begin until the next pay period, and the first contributions will be slightly higher as they include a pro rata amount. If that sounds familiar, for any of you that had a staging date back in the day, that was a very common scenario when you first stage. So example we're going to go through is we have a monthly payroll where employees are paid monthly on the last day of the month. And we've chosen a re-enrolment date of the 1st of October, which falls into tax month 6. So we need to run an assessment within that tax period. Now with our pay date, that means we run our pension assessment for the 30th of September pay date, which will re-enroll our eligible job holders who previously opted out or left. However, their first pension contributions will only be deducted from the 31st of October, with that first contribution including a pro rata amount relating to the period the 1st to the 5th of October. And we'll bring that to life when we go through the demo. So if I just bring that slide down, and I'm going to return to my payroll tasks. I've already set my pay date to the 30th of September. And before I go into the assessment, I just want to show you that I have 3 employees that have previously opted out or left the pension. So currently, within their employee record on the pensions tab, we can see that the status is opt out for this first employee. They opted out back in October 2020. Next employee left the scheme a bit later on in February 2021. And my most recent employee opted out last month after being enrolled as a new starter. So they have opted out recently, and due to the settings that I entered, this employee will not be re-enrolled. So what you would do is you would enter your payments in the usual way. So you've recorded the employee's wage for the current period. You would then go into the pension assessment option. The system will detect that you've now reached your re-enrolment date. So it'll show a summary of your re-enrolment settings with the last option here to change any of those settings before you proceed. So I'm happy with the re-enrolment date. I'm excluding employees from the assessment who left recently. And I'm ticking this box to say that I'm happy. If I then proceed, it'll prompt me to take a backup, which is highly recommended before doing any re-enrolment activity. So if you don't already have a backup, make sure you take one, maybe slightly rename it so you know that that's the backup you'd need to restore if you want to undo any changes. And then once the backup has been taken, that'll take us into the assessment screen. And what we're looking for are any flags next to names, which would indicate a change to the previous status. So as predicted, we've got a flag for employee 1 and 3. And if I hover over one of those flags, it confirms that the employee is cyclically re-enrolled this period. Quick way for checking for changes, if you don't already know, is to use the filters. So I've got 2 with changes this period. Both of these employees have been re-enrolled. But I also have an employee who remains opted out. So this was employee 10, and that's because their opt-out date was within 12 months of our re-enrolment date. So they're going to stay out of the pension. And I've got some employees who are non-eligible or entitled, so they also will remain outside of the pension. Now, looking at the employees that have been enrolled, if you check their contributions, it shows the percentages, but it doesn't show any amounts at this stage. The reason for that is our process date is the 30th of September, re-enrolment date is the 1st of October. So what's happening behind the scenes is it's calculating the pro rata amount and it's storing that figure, and that will then be included in next month's contribution. So no contribution as yet, but re-enrolment has been kicked off. And if we just hover over the status, we can see that that re-enrolment date has been set to the 1st of October. So if you want to keep a record of the assessment, you can always print it out here at the bottom, email a copy or download the grid as a CSV. I'm going to simply close out at this point, and we then just get a message explaining the next steps, which include completing the redeclaration of compliance on the pensions regulator website, sending enrolment files to the pension provider using your usual method, which might be send pension data, and writing to employees that you re-enroll within 6 weeks, which we can do using send pension correspondence. So I'm just going to close out of that screen, which returns us back to the main payroll desktop. And what we can then do is we can complete our pay run by producing the pay slips and reports. We can run update records, which I'm going to do just now. And then you would do your FPS submission in the usual way. So taking a quick look at the 3 employees we selected at the start. So the pension scheme for employee 1 has now been assigned. So they are auto-enrolled as of the 1st of October. And similar to what you saw when Calvin did it manually, that has reassigned the scheme with the effective from date. Exactly the same for the next employee. So re-enrolled as of the 1st of October. But for the employee who was opted out, they remain opted out because they have been excluded. So finally, we'll take a look at the letters that we need to send to these employees explaining that they've been re-enrolled. So if I open up Send Pension Correspondence, here at the bottom of the payroll tasks, you'll see that there are 2 re-enrollment notices that are ready to send. We need to send them by the 12th of November, but the date that we send these will start the 1-month opt-out window. So we might want to give these employees the chance to opt out before we actually take their first contributions by sending them the letter and sending the details to the pension provider. I'll just show you what the letter looks like by clicking the item name, just to give us a preview. So it explains to the employee that they've met the criteria and they're going to be re-enrolled on the 1st of October in this case. And then they've got some questions and answers, including what to do if they don't want to join the scheme and how they can opt out. And then this can then be printed or emailed and sent to the employee. So when you're ready to produce the letters, it's just a case of selecting the letters that you're sending, recording the sent on date. So I'm actually going to send these on the re-enrollment date, recording who sent them. So I've sent these letters as the payroll user. And if I click onto send and send again, it'll then prompt me to print out the re-enrollment letters. So I'm just going to cancel that screen because I'm not actually connected to a printer. But we've produced letters for 2 employees, and a copy of that letter is saved in the employee's record. And it can also be found if we view our historical communications, and we can see on the 1st of October, we sent out our 2 re-enrollment notices. So when it comes to our next pay run, which will actually be 31st of October in this case, we would run through the pay run in the usual way. We would run our pension assessment. So I'm just going to skip the backup for this one, because what I want to show you is that the contributions have now started for employees 1 and 3. And looking specifically at employee 3, they actually earn the same as employee 2, the £2,500. But you can see that their contribution this month is slightly higher because it contains that pro rata amount for the 5 days they've been enrolled in the previous pay reference period. And similarly, for this first employee, though they're earning a bit more, that contribution will include a pro rata amount. Now, if they have completed the opt-out process by this stage, we can enter the opt-out details. So let's just say that employee 1 has contacted the provider and they've followed the opt-out process. So I'm going to record their opt-out details, including the date that they opted out. There is nothing to refund for this employee because this would have been the first contribution. However, if you had taken a contribution, maybe they're paid weekly or they took a bit longer to opt out, you'll have the refund option available, assuming they've opted out within the 1-month opt-out period. And if I click the opt-out button, you can see that that will effectively reverse the enrollment. It's put their status back to opt out. It's took them off the pension scheme. And in this case, it's avoided having to take that first contribution. So that would all be done if they have opted out again in subsequent pay runs. So in this case, it was on the next pay date. So that's about it for the demo, but let's just recap some of the screens that you've just seen. So when we went into the assessment in the pay period of our re-enrolment date, you get a summary of your settings, the option to change those settings, and a tick box to acknowledge you're happy and you're ready to proceed. We then went into the assessment and we're looking for any flags to indicate a change. And we had a couple of employees that were cyclically re-enrolled this period. But because our pay date was before the re-enrolment date, at that point, there were no contributions. When we close out of the pension assessment, it summarizes the next steps. So redeclaration is one of those, which Calvin will be covering next. Sending the enrollment information to your provider using your usual method, and writing to the employees, which we did using send pension correspondence. And then that letter can be sent, informing them being re-enrolled, and then if they want to, they can follow the opt-out process again. So that's it for the pensions module demo. But we're now going to bring Calvin back, and he's going to finish things off with a little bit of info on redeclaration. So back over to you, Calvin.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Okay, so let's have a look at the redeclaration process as well. Now, there's a bit of good news when it comes to the redeclaration, but before we get into that, I do just want to remind you of the timeline of events. So remember, you have that 6-month window, 3 months before your 3rd anniversary and 3 months after. The deadline for the redeclaration ignores that window altogether and simply goes off that 3rd anniversary of your staging and duty start date, or of course your previous re-enrollment date. Meaning you will always have 5 months from that date, whether it be 2 months from the latest possible re-enrollment date, or of course 8 months from your earliest possible re-enrollment date. Okay, so do keep that one in mind, because if you do go for the latest, you will only have those 2 months. So yes, that's just a quick reminder of the timeline when it comes to it. Now for the good news. Now this is good news from a Sage 50 payroll perspective and the product itself. You don't need to do anything in the program. Okay, so once you have completed the process, either manually, as I showed you earlier, or the pensions module, as Duncan's just shown you there, then that is it for Sage 50 payroll. So you've done everything in there and you can continue to process your payroll as normal. What you do need to do though is complete and submit the redeclaration of compliance form that is found on the pensions regulator website. Now, if you're downloading a copy of the handout today, there is a useful link that we've included that takes you directly to it if you need it there as well, but you can simply pop it into Google search or find it via their website. So the redeclaration form is done directly through the pension regulator and it is done through their website itself. So as I mentioned, the good news there is you don't need to do anything in the program. Once you've gone through the steps that we've both showed you before, then you're all up to date Sage 50 payroll wise. So that was the redeclaration. So there isn't too much to it. It is simply going on the pension regulator website and obviously completing that form. So what we are now up to is a little bit of a quiz as a recap. And a reminder at this point as well, if you do have any questions, you can continue to ask them at this point as well, whilst we go through the quiz. And of course, the quiz itself is completely anonymous. We will be sharing the results in a percentage format, but we will not be sharing who has answered what. So it is an anonymous quiz and it is optional as well, but it is a bit of a recap. So there are 3 questions, okay, and we are going to do them via a poll. So you will see on screen shortly a poll appear with the question and 3 options. Select what you think is the right answer and then hit submit. And then we'll move on to we'll reveal the right answer, of course, and then we will move on to the next question. So let's get started. We will leave these on for about a minute as well, of course, time depending. So let's hit launch on the first one. And this is all about choosing your re-enrollment date. So when can you choose your re-enrollment date based on the 3rd anniversary of your staging or duty start date? Is it any time from 3 months before to 3 months after? Is it within 6 weeks after? Or is it within 1 month after? So those are the three options. So remember, just to select the one you think is correct and then hit the submit button. And I will give you a clue. It's cast your mind back to that timeline that we showed you as well. The other thing to mention whilst we're waiting for this one to go, because we've got about 30 seconds left for it, so we'll leave that on for a minute. We have another webinar happening on Thursday, all about report selections and custom report settings as well. So it doesn't go too much into designing reports, but it does give you a little bit of customization on certain reports. So if you're interested in that, there is a link at the very top of the Q&A section on the right-hand side. So if you haven't got that open, click the question icon and you'll be able to see that, and you can click and you can register for that if you wish to come join us, and we do hope we see as many people on that as possible. Okay, so we have had the minute there. So we're going to close that one now, and we're going to share the results. So we have an overwhelming majority of 95% have gone with any time from 3 months before to 3 months after. And that majority is absolutely correct. Yes, so it is 3 months before that third anniversary date to 3 months after that anniversary date. So we do have a little 6-month window there, which is 3 months before, 3 months after. So let's hide that one now, and we'll move on to question number 2. Again, timeline-wise, how long have you got to complete your redeclaration? Is it 5 months from the date you choose to re-enroll? Is it 5 months from the third anniversary of your staging or duty start date, or of course the last re-enrollment period you had? Or is it 6 weeks after completing your re-enrollment? So those are the three options. It's 5 months from the date you choose for re-enrollment, or is it 5 months from the third anniversary, or is it 6 weeks after completing your re-enrollment itself? Again, I will draw your attention back to that timeline. So anyone who has downloaded the handout may get a little hint by looking at that. And again, we will leave this on for about a minute, which means we've got about 10 seconds left for this one. Okay, so that is the minute up. So let us close that one down now. And once again, we'll share the results. A little smaller majority this time, but it is still a big majority. It's not quite 95%, it's 77% have gone with 5 months from the third anniversary of your staging or duty start date. 18% of you went with 5 months from the date you choose your re-enrollment, and we got a 5% going with 6 weeks after. Well, I can tell you that the majority is correct. So it is always 5 months from that third anniversary date. So it doesn't matter when you choose. If you choose to go with the earliest, you'll have 8 months. If you choose to go with the latest, you'll have 2 months. So it doesn't matter which date you choose. It is always 5 months from that one date, which is the third anniversary of your staging or duty start date, or of course, the last time you went through your re-enrollment. Okay, let's hide that one and we'll get on to the final question, which is a true or false statement. I'm going to launch that now. So, true or false? I've not had to re-enroll any of my staff, so I do not need to complete the redeclaration. Is that statement true or is that statement false? A bit more context around it for you. If you had an employee who is eligible, but is already enrolled, so you've not had to actually re-enroll or add anyone else to the pension scheme because they're all already in it, for example, you don't need to fill in the redeclaration form. So again, is that statement that we've got on screen there, is it true or is it false? And we do have 20 seconds left for this question. Okay, that is the minute up, so we shall close that one out. Let us share the results, and a big majority on this one, 96% of you going with false. 96% of you were correct, yes. So even if you've not had to re-enroll anyone, so you've not actually had to do anything in the program other than simply assess your employees, then you still need to fill in your redeclaration. So regardless of what you have to do in terms of enrolling employees, you still need to complete your redeclaration form as well. So that's something you have to do every 3 years, of course, as well. So that form is mandatory regardless of what actions you've had to take. Okay, that is the final question. So let's bring back my screen and we'll move on to the final bit of the webinar today, which is all about further support available to you. Remember as well, we will be answering questions at this time as well, so please do get them in if you have any, of course. So the further support that you have available, first of all, is our help centre. So you can visit sage.co.uk/help to search through our knowledge base. So if you do have a question that comes to you after the session has come to an end, like is often the case when I do it, you always think, oh, I wish I'd asked that. Well, you can visit our help centre and type that question in the search bar to have a look through all of the available guides that we have. We also have specific support guides, so you can see there's a workplace pensions option there on the screenshot. When you click on that, you will find a section for re-enrolment, or of course, any other pension related questions you might have, or 50 payroll in general. We also have access to our webinars. So if you haven't been able to click the link at the top of the question screen today, you can visit our help center, click on the webinars section at the top, and you can see what webinars we have coming up in the future. We do run them weekly. There are 2 a week, every week. So please do have a look at that. And we do tend to update the schedule on a monthly basis. So October's is currently scheduled there. There are videos, and of course, if you do need to speak to anyone, you can find the get in touch options here. Now, another little trick that I would like you all to give a go, if you've got your Sage 50 Payroll open right now, have it on screen, so make sure it's clicked active, and press F1 on your keyboard when you're in the program itself, and you will have a sort of micro version of the Help Center appear on there as well. But this time, if you're in a specific area of the payroll program, so for example, the pension assessment, as Duncan was there, when you press F1, you'll get guides that are specific about that area you are in. So it is completely tailored and contextual help available at your fingertips. So it is literal click of F1 or click on any of the help guides as well. So I do encourage you to give that a go because it doesn't impact what you're doing in the payroll program at all. It's just a quick window and it'll see how you can access all of the available on screen now directly from the program. And last but certainly not least, we have Sage University. So head on over to sageu.com and register for free and access a vast library of e-learning, Sage product certifications, such as badges, and bite-sized learning can all be found in Sage University. Now, I do very much highly recommend you get a look at this as well if you would like to expand your Sage 50 payroll learning or even your Sage 50 accounts if you have that program as well, and join us at Sage University. It's a great little resource. All of the courses can be done at your own pace and in your own time as well. So I am aware time is of the essence when it comes to running payroll, but if you do ever get a spare moment and would like to learn a bit more, then Sage University is certainly the place to be. Okay, so that wraps it up for today. We've got a couple of minutes left. If any of you do have any questions, if you are leaving us at this point as well, thank you so much for attending today. I certainly hope you've enjoyed it and it's made your re-enrollment duties maybe a little less stressful or a little less worrying. Hopefully you're now confident and comfortable to perform that with ease and save a load of time. That's definitely the aim of today's session. When you do leave today, whether it be now or at the end when we close the session down, you will be directed to a short feedback survey. And I do apologize for sounding a little bit like a broken record on this one, because you probably have heard this a million times whenever you speak to any support team at all. But it does mean a lot to both myself and Duncan if you spend that time filling it in. We do read it quite religiously and we try to make as many changes as possible based on the feedback that you give us. It also gives us some really good ideas as well. So the quiz was one of them, and that was based on feedback from you. So we do listen to it and we do read it religiously, and we do try and make changes off the back of it as best we possibly can. So I do appreciate you spending that a bit of time filling that in, even though you've probably heard that ask a million times. So thank you. I'm going to jump on mute now, help out with any questions that we have coming in, and then I will be back if we run out of time, or of course we have answered all of the questions as well. So I'll be back shortly, and I'm just going to jump on mute. Thank you again. Okay, so I can see that we haven't actually had any questions come through for a while as well. We have waited a little bit and we were due to end shortly anyway in about a minute's time. So we're going to close the session now. So hopefully the content had answered any potential questions that you have, which is why we haven't seen any today. As well, don't forget as well, you've got the help center if one does come to you a little bit later on. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended today as well. I hope as well you've enjoyed it. Not just learned, but had a bit of fun whilst we were there as well, especially with that quiz. And don't forget about the feedback form when we come to end the session. So all that's left for me to say is thank you once more. I hope you're all looking after yourselves out there and staying safe, and hopefully we will see you in another one shortly. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.